For more on Made in China, let's talk to Isabel Hilton, founder of China Dialogue. Isabel, welcome back to the programme. How would you describe the evolution of China's manufacturing over the past decades?
Oh, gosh. Well, you've seen it go from the kind of low added value, low wage manufacturing that is fairly characteristic of the first stage of a kind of catch up industrialization, which China went through from the sort of 80s and the 90s. And then when you get to the point where China joins the WTO, so 2002, there's a lot of inward investment, there's a lot of joint venturing. And China begins to take off. It begins to take off in moving up the value chain, moving up the technology chain. And then the final frontier, if you like, which is innovation. So China has been very good at innovating in process, and we're just beginning to see the breakthroughs in innovations in technology. So Chinese factories now are extraordinarily well organized. They're extremely efficient. They do, sometimes, foreigners do complain, and other countries do complain that they enjoy privileges from the government in the way of cheap land and cheap credit, and there's some truth to that. But less often discussed is the absolutely ferocious competition that goes on. So there is when an industry gets to a certain level of maturity, and you're seeing it now, for example, in electric vehicles, there is ferocious competition and price struggling, and only the fittest survive. So those that do survive are really among the best in the world.
And I wonder, Isabel, if you could explain this concept of a lighthouse factory and what could be said about their growth in China.
A lighthouse factory, it's an idea that comes from McKinsey and the World Economic Forum, and it's a factory that embodies the qualities of what they call the fourth industrial revolution, and that's the industrial revolution which brings together advanced technologies of various kinds for, to get a bigger bang for your buck. So it might be bringing together AI, cloud computing, and robots, China has, again, pretty much been on the front line of this. So if you look back to 2020, for example, China had 6 globally recognized lighthouse factories, and now it's got around 45. That's about a third of the world's total, and that's in 5 years. So, China is very much at the forefront of industrial innovation at this point.
And you touched on how well organized China's factories are, and China's labor market is known for its discipline, its efficiency. Do you think other countries can match China's manufacturing output prowess if needs be?
Well, certainly not overnight. You mentioned the labour force, and certainly the labour force, again, is very highly disciplined. They work longer hours than the global average, too, so they're pretty hard working. The industrial labour force is not the majority of the labour force in China, and you're getting a kind of bifurcation between the industrial labour force, which is increasingly highly skilled, and casual labour, the gig economy, agricultural labour. So, there are big differences in labour conditions in China. But you can't just pick up a factory and plonk it down in another country, in another culture, and have the level of skill that modern factories demand. And it's been a problem, actually, because there have been some efforts. There's quite a lot more effort to reshore, a bit of decoupling that's gone on in the last 5 or 6 years, and the labour force has always been the problem. If you move a factory from Asia to the United States, for example, you come across very entrenched privileges, so holidays, weekends, working hours, that kind of thing, which China has less respect for, shall we say. So that's often a problem. I do expect the labour force in China to change because it's getting older and it's getting less numerous. So I think the factory of the future, there will be more robots than people.
As ever, really great to get your reflections. We appreciate it. Isabel Hilton, founder of China Dialogue, thank you.